The scorching summer sun hung mercilessly in the Montana sky as Nora Faulkner stood on the auction block, her wrists bound with coarse rope that bit into her skin. Whispers rippled through the crowd gathered in Concordia's dusty town square, harsh words that carried like tumbleweeds across the parched ground. "Damaged goods," they muttered, eyeing the jagged scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw, a permanent reminder of the stagecoach accident that had claimed her parents' lives 3 months prior. The year was 1878, and at 22, Nora had found herself indebted to the bank after her parents' funeral costs, and her own medical expenses had drained what little savings they'd had. Unable to pay, she faced the cruel reality of frontier justice being sold to the highest bidder to work off her debt. "What am I bid for this woman?" the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the square. "Good for housework, cooking, whatever you need. Comes with some damage, as you can see, but she's healthy enough." Nora stared at the ground, refusing to meet the evaluating gazes of the men who stood before her. Some were ranchers looking for help, others shopkeepers in need of assistance. A few had darker intentions that made her stomach twist with fear. $5, called a voice from the back, followed by chuckles. 10, said another. 15, called a third, the owner of the saloon whose reputation made Nora's blood run cold. Then a new voice cut through the crowd, deep and steady as the distant thunder that sometimes rolled across the plains. $100. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, revealing a tall man astride a magnificent chestnut stallion. His broad shoulders were draped in a worn leather duster, a Stetson pulled low over eyes that burned with an intensity that made the auctioneer take a step back. "Zachary Fenton," someone whispered, and the name rippled through the crowd. Nora had heard the name before the owner of the Silver Creek Ranch, 10 miles outside of town. A man who kept to himself, who had come from somewhere back east with money and secrets. $100, the auctioneer repeated, surprised. "That's far more than her debt, Mr. Fenton." Zachary Fenton dismounted, his spurs jingling softly as he strode forward. He stopped at the base of the auction block and looked up at Nora, really looked at her, not just at the scar but at the woman who bore it. "They call you damaged goods," he said, his voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear. "I see only treasure." The auctioneer's gavel fell with a crack that echoed through the square. "Sold to Mr. Zachary Fenton." As Nora descended the steps of the auction block, her legs trembled beneath her, uncertain whether she was walking toward salvation or a different kind of prison. The sheriff cut the ropes from her wrists, and she rubbed at the raw skin while studying the man who had just purchased her freedom or perhaps just her servitude in a new form. Zachary Fenton stood 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes a startling shade of blue that reminded Nora of the mountain lakes her father had once taken her to see held something she hadn't expected: kindness. "Miss Faulkner," he said, tipping his hat, "I apologize for the spectacle. No person should ever be treated this way." Nora wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly exposed under the curious gazes of the townsfolk. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you pay so much?" "Because freedom should never have a price," he answered simply. "And no one should profit from another's misfortune." He gestured toward his horse. "I've a wagon coming with supplies. It should be here shortly. You're welcome to ride with me back to Silver Creek, where I can offer you proper employment with fair wages, or I can provide you with enough money to take the next stage to wherever you'd like to go." Nora blinked, not comprehending. "You're giving me a choice." "Every person deserves that much." The sheriff, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward with a skeptical expression. "Fenton, you understand the law, don't you? You've purchased her debt contract. She works for you until it's paid." Zachary turned to the lawman, his expression hardening. "And I'm choosing to tear up that contract, Sheriff Davis, unless you'd like to explain to Judge Wilson why you're interfering in a private business transaction." The sheriff stepped back, hands raised in surrender. "Have it your way. Just don't come crying when she runs off with your money." Nora stiffened at the insult, but Zachary merely smiled. "I believe I'll take my chances." A wagon rolled up, driven by an older man with a silver beard. "Got everything on your list, Mr. Fenton," he called out cheerfully. "Thank you, Hank." Zachary turned back to Nora. "The offer stands, Miss Faulkner. Employment or passage elsewhere. The choice is yours." Nora looked around at the town of Concordia, at the faces that had called her damaged goods, at the bank that had seized her parents' modest home, at the life that had crumbled around her. Then she looked at Zachary Fenton, this strange man who spoke of choice and freedom when he had every right to command. "I'll come to Silver Creek," she said finally. "At least until I can decide what's next." Zachary nodded, seeming neither pleased nor disappointed by her decision. "Fair enough." He offered his hand to help her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. As they rode out of town, Nora felt the eyes of Concordia's residents on her back, their whispers following like dust in their wake. She sat stiffly, trying to maintain as much distance as possible between herself and the solid chest behind her. "Relax, Miss Faulkner," Zachary said quietly. "You're safe now." "Why would you help someone like me?" she asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. In her experience, men didn't offer help without expecting something in return. "Someone like you," he echoed. "You mean someone who's fallen on hard times through no fault of their own, someone who's endured more than their fair share of suffering. I'd help anyone in your position if I could." "The scar doesn't bother you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "We all have scars, Miss Faulkner," he replied after a moment. "Some are just more visible than others." The ride to Silver Creek Ranch took nearly 2 hours, with Hank following in the wagon behind them. As they traveled, the landscape opened up before them, rolling hills giving way to meadows dotted with wildflowers, a stream cutting through the land like a silver ribbon. "It's beautiful," Nora murmured, despite herself. "It is," Zachary agreed. "When I first came here 5 years ago, I knew this was where I belonged. The land has a way of healing what's broken inside a person." They crested a hill, and below them spread the Silver Creek Ranch, a large main house built of logs and stone, a barn, stables, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and horses ran in a fenced pasture near the house. "Home," Zachary said simply, and spurred his horse forward. As they approached, a woman emerged from the main house, gray-haired and round, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face lit up at the sight of them. "Mr. Fenton, you're back earlier than I expected," she called out cheerfully. Zachary dismounted and helped Nora down from the horse. "Mrs. Hoffman, this is Miss Nora Faulkner. She'll be staying with us for a while. Miss Faulkner, this is Mrs. Eliza Hoffman, the finest housekeeper west of the Mississippi." Mrs. Hoffman's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Nora's scar, but her smile never faltered. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Faulkner. You must be exhausted from your journey. Come inside and I'll fix you something to eat." "Thank you," Nora said cautiously, still waiting for the catch, for the moment when the kindness would be revealed as something else. "Mrs. Hoffman, could you show Miss Faulkner to the guest room in the East Wing?" Zachary asked. "I need to help Hank unload the supplies." "Of course, Mr. Fenton. Come along, dear," Mrs. Hoffman said, placing a gentle hand on Nora's arm. Inside, the ranch house was surprisingly elegant, not ostentatious, but comfortable and well-appointed. Mrs. Hoffman led Nora up a staircase to a room larger than any Nora had ever called her own, with a four-poster bed, a dresser, a washstand, and windows that looked out over the meadows. "This is for me?" Nora asked in disbelief. "Mr. Fenton said you'd be staying with us, Mrs. Hoffman replied, bustling about to open the windows. "We don't get many female guests out here, so it's nice to have someone to fuss over." "But I'm not a guest," Nora clarified. "Mr. Fenton has offered me employment." Mrs. Hoffman paused. "Did he now? Well, that's good news. We could use the help around here. What kind of work did he have in mind for you?" "He didn't specify," Nora admitted. "That sounds like him," Mrs. Hoffman chuckled. "Mr. Fenton has a good heart, but sometimes he forgets the practical details. No matter, we'll sort it out. For now, why don't you rest? There's water in the pitcher if you'd like to freshen up, and I'll bring you some clean clothes. Dinner is at 6 in the dining room downstairs." After Mrs. Hoffman left, Nora stood in the middle of the room, uncertain what to do with herself. This wasn't what she had expected, not the auction, not the rescue, not this beautiful room that seemed too good to be true. She went to the window and looked out at the land that stretched before her. In the distance, she could see Zachary directing the unloading of supplies, his sleeves rolled up as he worked alongside Hank and another man. He laughed at something one of them said, head thrown back, the sound carrying faintly through the open window. For the first time since the accident, Nora felt something stir inside her, a tiny flicker of hope that perhaps her life wasn't over after all. That evening, dressed in a simple blue dress that Mrs. Hoffman had provided, Nora made her way downstairs. She heard voices from the dining room and hesitated at the doorway, suddenly unsure of herself. Zachary looked up and spotted her. "Miss Faulkner, please join us." He rose from his seat at the head of the table, where he sat with Mrs. Hoffman, Hank, and two other men. "Miss Faulkner, these are some of the people who keep Silver Creek running," Zachary said as she took the seat he indicated at his right. "You've met Hank Thompson, my foreman. This is Thomas Raid, who manages our horses, and Peter Collins, who oversees the cattle operation." The men nodded politely, and Nora returned the greeting, feeling their curious gazes on her scar. "Miss Faulkner will be joining us here at Silver Creek," Zachary continued, as Mrs. Hoffman began serving a hearty stew. "I thought perhaps she might help with the accounts and correspondence, given that my handwriting is, as you've all pointed out numerous times, completely illegible." Nora looked at him in surprise. "You want me to help with your business matters, if you're amenable," Zachary replied. "Mrs. Hoffman mentioned you were a schoolteacher before." "Before the accident," Nora finished for him. "Yes, I taught at the schoolhouse in Concordia. But how did you know? Small towns talk," he said with a shrug. "And teachers are known for their neat handwriting and good head for figures." "Unless I'm mistaken." "No, you're not mistaken," Nora admitted. "I've always been good with numbers and letters." "Then it's settled," Zachary said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to entrust his business affairs to a woman he'd just purchased at auction. The conversation turned to ranch matters, fences that needed mending, a mare about to foal, plans for the upcoming cattle drive. Nora ate quietly, observing the easy camaraderie among these people. There was respect in how they addressed Zachary, but not fear, and he listened to their opinions with genuine interest. After dinner, Zachary asked Nora to join him in his study. It was a comfortable room lined with bookshelves, a large desk by the window, and a sitting area with leather chairs before a fireplace. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. He poured 2 small glasses of amber liquid and offered one to her. "I don't drink spirits," she said automatically, It's just a little whiskey, he said with a smile. But I understand. He set the glass aside and took a seat across from her. Miss Faulkner, I want to be clear about your position here. You are not indentured to me or to Silver Creek. You're free to leave whenever you wish. If you choose to stay and work as my business assistant, I'll pay you a fair wage, $20 a month, plus room and board. Nora's eyes widened. $20 a month was more than she'd made as a teacher. That's very generous, she said cautiously. But why? You don't know me. I could be terrible with accounts for all you know. Are you? He asked, one eyebrow raised. No, she admitted. But that's not the point. Zachary leaned forward, his eyes serious. Miss Faulkner, I've been where you are. Not exactly, of course, but I know what it's like to have the world pulled out from under your feet, to be at the mercy of others' judgment. He paused. I came west after the war with nothing but nightmares and guilt. This land gave me a second chance. I'd like to do the same for you. The war. She asked softly. I fought for the Union, he said, his eyes distant. Lost everything except my life, and there were times I wasn't sure that was worth keeping either. He shook himself, as if dispelling the memory. But that's ancient history. The point is, Silver Creek could use someone with your skills, and you could use a fresh start. It seems a fair arrangement to me. Nora studied him, trying to reconcile the successful rancher before her with the broken soldier he described. And if it doesn't work out, then you leave with a reference and enough money to start somewhere new, he said simply. No harm done. And you expect nothing else from me, she pressed, needing to be absolutely clear. Zachary's expression darkened slightly. Miss Faulkner, I am not that kind of man. You have my word that your virtue is safe at Silver Creek. All I ask is honest work and respect for those who live and work here. Nora nodded slowly. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Fenton. Thank you. Excellent, he said, his expression clearing. We'll start tomorrow. For now, get some rest. The West has a way of waking early. As Nora made her way back to her room, she pondered the strange turn her life had taken. That morning, she had awakened in a cell awaiting auction. Tonight, she would sleep in a comfortable bed in a beautiful home, with the promise of honest work and fair pay. It seemed too good to be true, but for tonight at least, she would allow herself to believe it. The next morning, Nora awoke to sunlight streaming through her window and the distant sounds of a ranch coming to life. She dressed quickly in the clothes Mrs. Hoffman had provided, a simple skirt and shirtwaist that fit surprisingly well, and made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hoffman was already at work, frying bacon and mixing biscuit dough. Good morning, Miss Faulkner. You're up bright and early, the housekeeper greeted her cheerfully. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in months, Nora admitted. Can I help you with breakfast? Aren't you sweet to offer? Mrs. Hoffman said with a smile. But no need. I've been cooking for this bunch for years. You go on and see Mr. Fenton in his study. He's been up since before dawn, muttering about ledgers and invoices. Nora found Zachary at his desk, surrounded by stacks of papers, his hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. Mrs. Hoffman said you wanted to see me, Nora said from the doorway. Zachary looked up, relief washing over his features. Miss Faulkner, thank goodness. Please come in and save me from this paperwork before it buries me alive. Despite herself, Nora smiled at his dramatic tone. Is it that bad? Worse, he said grimly. I've been putting it off for too long. The spring cattle sale was 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't reconciled the accounts. Then there are supply orders, payroll for the hands, correspondence with the bank in Helena. He gestured at the chaos on his desk. I'm much better with cattle than columns of figures. Nora approached the desk and began sorting through the papers, quickly identifying invoices, receipts, and letters. This will take some organizing, she said, but it's not impossible. Do you have a system? Zachary's sheepish expression was answer enough. I see, Nora said, trying not to sound judgmental. Well, first things first. We need to create a filing system, separate personal from business expenses, and establish a proper ledger. For the next few hours, they worked side by side, with Nora creating order from chaos and Zachary providing the information she needed to make sense of it all. By lunchtime, the desk was clear, the papers neatly sorted into categories, and Nora had begun entering figures into a fresh ledger book. You're a miracle worker, Zachary declared, leaning back in his chair and stretching his arms overhead. Hardly, Nora replied, though she felt a small glow of pride at his praise. Just organized. A quality I sorely lack, he admitted. My mother used to say I'd lose my head if it weren't attached. The casual mention of his mother made Nora realize how little she knew about this man who had rescued her from auction. Where is your family? She asked. Something flickered across his face, a shadow of old pain. Gone, he said simply. My parents died before the war and my brother didn't survive Gettysburg. I'm sorry, Nora said softly. It's hard, isn't it, being the one left behind? Zachary met her gaze, and in that moment, a current of understanding passed between them, the knowledge of what it meant to survive when others hadn't. Yes, he said. It is. Mrs. Hoffman's call for lunch broke the moment, and they joined the others in the dining room. Over a meal of cold chicken and fresh bread, Zachary announced that Nora would be taking over the ranch's accounts and correspondence. Thank the Lord, Hank said fervently. Maybe now we'll get paid on time. Everyone laughed, including Zachary, who took the ribbing good-naturedly. After lunch, Zachary offered to show Nora around the ranch. They walked through the barn, where Thomas was working with a young colt, then to the corral where several cowboys were breaking horses. Silver Creek runs about 2,000 head of cattle, Zachary explained as they walked. We also breed horses, quarter horses mostly, though I've a weakness for a good thoroughbred. As if to prove his point, a magnificent black stallion trotted over to the fence, nickering softly. This is Midnight, Zachary said, reaching out to stroke the horse's velvet nose. I brought him all the way from Kentucky as a colt, cost me more than I care to admit. He's beautiful, Nora said, admiring the stallion's glossy coat and intelligent eyes. Would you like to ride him? Zachary asked. Nora stepped back instinctively. No, I haven't ridden since the accident. Understanding dawned in Zachary's eyes. The stagecoach crash, he said quietly. Was it horses that? Nora nodded, her hand unconsciously rising to touch her scar. The team spooked at a rattlesnake. The coach went over a ravine. My parents were killed instantly. I was thrown clear, but... She gestured to her face. The doctor said I was lucky to keep my eye. I'm sorry for your loss, Zachary said, his voice gentle, and for bringing up painful memories. It's all right, Nora said, forcing a small smile. It's been 3 months. I need to get used to talking about it. They continued their tour, with Zachary pointing out the boundaries of the ranch, the creek that gave the property its name, and the distant mountains that marked the edge of his land. It's a beautiful place, Nora said as they walked back toward the house. You've built something remarkable here. Thank you, Zachary said. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every struggle. As they approached the house, a rider came galloping up the drive, his horse lathered with sweat. Mr. Fenton. The young man called out, pulling his mount to a stop. Got a telegram from town for you. Station master said it was urgent. Zachary took the envelope with a frown. Thank you, Jimmy. Get yourself something to eat from Mrs. Hoffman before you head back. He opened the telegram and read it quickly, his expression darkening. Bad news? Nora asked. Potentially, Zachary replied. The bank in Helena is sending a representative to review my loan application for expanding the ranch, They'll be here tomorrow." "Is that unusual for them to send someone in person?" "Yes," he sighed. "I'd better make sure everything's in order." "Would you mind helping me prepare the financial statements?" "Of course," Nora said. "That's what you hired me for after all." They spent the rest of the afternoon and evening reviewing the ranch's finances, with Nora creating clear, concise statements that showcased Silver Creek's profitability and potential for growth. Zachary explained his vision for expansion: more grazing land, improved breeding stock, perhaps even a small sawmill to process timber from the forested portion of his property. "You've thought this through," Nora observed as they worked. "I've been planning it for 2 years," Zachary admitted. "This land has given me everything: a home, a purpose, peace. I want to see it reach its full potential." By the time they finished, it was well past midnight. Nora's eyes burned with fatigue, but she felt a sense of accomplishment as she looked at the neat stack of documents they had prepared. "This should satisfy even the most skeptical banker," she said, stifling a yawn. "Thanks to you," Zachary said. "I couldn't have done this alone." "You would have managed," Nora replied, though she was pleased by his gratitude. "Perhaps," he conceded, "but not nearly as well." He stood and stretched, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the lamplight. "We should both get some rest. Tomorrow will be an important day." As Nora climbed the stairs to her room, she reflected on how quickly her circumstances had changed. From auctioned, damaged goods to trusted assistant in just one day. It seemed almost like a dream, and part of her feared waking up back in that cell in Concordia. But when she awoke the next morning, she was still in the comfortable bed at Silver Creek, with sunlight streaming through the window and the promise of a new day ahead. She dressed carefully in the best of the clothes Mrs. Hoffman had provided: a deep green skirt and a cream-colored blouse with a high collar that partially obscured her scar. After pinning her hair into a neat chignon, she studied her reflection in the mirror. The scar was still there, a jagged line that pulled slightly at the corner of her eye, but it was fading from angry red to silver. Perhaps one day it would be just another feature, not the first thing people noticed about her. Downstairs, she found Zachary in the dining room, dressed more formally than she had yet seen him, in a black suit and white shirt. His hair was neatly combed, and he had trimmed his beard. He looked up as she entered, his eyes widening slightly. "Good morning, Miss Faulkner," he said, rising from his seat. "You look very nice today." "Thank you," she replied, feeling a strange flutter in her chest at his approval. "I thought it best to make a good impression on the bank representative." "I appreciate that." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Please join me for breakfast. Mrs. Hoffman has outdone herself." The table was laden with eggs, bacon, biscuits, preserves, and fresh coffee. As they ate, Zachary outlined his plan for the day: a tour of the ranch for the banker, followed by a review of the financial statements Nora had prepared, and dinner to conclude the visit. "I'd like you to join us for the financial discussion," he said. "You understand the numbers better than I do, and you can explain the statements you've prepared." "Of course," Nora agreed, though the idea of speaking to a banker made her nervous. In her experience, financial men had little respect for a woman's understanding of business matters. Around mid-morning, a smart buggy pulled up to the house, drawn by a matched pair of grays. A man stepped down, middle-aged, portly, with a watch chain stretched across his ample waistcoat and a bowler hat perched on his balding head. "Mr. Wilson," Zachary greeted him at the door, extending his hand. "Welcome to Silver Creek. Thank you for making the journey from Helena." "Mr. Fenton," the banker replied, removing his hat. "I trust you understand the unusual nature of this visit. The sum you're requesting is significant, and the board felt a personal assessment was warranted." I understand completely, Zachary said smoothly. I'm prepared to show you everything Silver Creek has to offer. But first, allow me to introduce my business manager, Miss Nora Faulkner. Nora stepped forward, extending her hand. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Wilson. The banker's eyes widened almost imperceptibly at the sight of her scar, but his manners prevailed. Miss Faulkner, he said with a nod. I wasn't aware that Mr. Fenton employed a female business manager. Miss Faulkner is new to Silver Creek, Zachary said, but her organizational skills and head for figures have already proven invaluable. Indeed, Mr. Wilson said, skepticism evident in his tone. Well, I look forward to reviewing your financial statements, wherever they may come from. Nora felt her cheeks flush at the slight, but Zachary's hand came to rest briefly on her arm, a silent reassurance. Shall we begin with a tour of the ranch? Zachary suggested, directing the conversation away from Nora. I think you'll be impressed by what you see. The morning passed with Zachary showing the banker every aspect of Silver Creek's operations: the healthy cattle herd, the prized horses, the efficient barns and outbuildings, the fertile grazing land, and the stream that provided water year-round. Mr. Wilson took notes in a small book, his expression giving little away. After lunch, they gathered in Zachary's study. Nora had arranged the financial statements on the desk, along with maps of the proposed expansion and projections for increased revenue. As you can see, Mr. Wilson, Nora began, indicating the neat columns of figures. Silver Creek has shown consistent growth over the past 5 years. The ranch operates at a 30% profit margin, well above industry standard, and Mr. Fenton has maintained an emergency fund equal to 6 months of operating expenses. Mr. Wilson peered at the documents through his spectacles. These figures are very precisely presented, he admitted grudgingly. But projections are merely educated guesses, Miss Faulkner. What assurance can you provide that these numbers will materialize? If I may, Zachary interjected, the cattle market has been strong for 3 consecutive years, with prices rising steadily. My breeding program has produced stock that consistently fetches top dollar at auction. And the expansion would allow us to increase the herd by at least 500 head within 2 years. Additionally, Nora added, we've included conservative estimates for the proposed sawmill operation, based on current timber prices and the established demand in Helena and surrounding communities. Mr. Wilson looked from Nora to Zachary, then back to the documents. Your case is compelling, he admitted finally. More so than I anticipated, if I'm being honest. Does that mean the bank will approve the loan? Zachary asked. I will make a favorable recommendation to the board, Mr. Wilson said carefully. Though I must point out that your personal history does raise some concerns. Your family's financial difficulties back east. Zachary's expression hardened. That was 15 years ago, Mr. Wilson, and had nothing to do with me. I've built Silver Creek from nothing into one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Surely that counts for more than ancient history. Of course, the banker said hastily. I merely mention it because the board will certainly bring it up. It's my job to anticipate their objections. And what would you suggest? Zachary asked, his tone clipped. Mr. Wilson hesitated. Additional collateral would strengthen your position considerably, perhaps if you were to marry. A wife with property or financial resources of her own would ease the board's concerns about stability. Nora felt rather than saw Zachary stiffen beside her. My personal life is not relevant to this loan application, Mr. Wilson. Either Silver Creek is a sound investment or it isn't. The banker spread his hands in a placating gesture. I understand your position, Mr. Fenton. I'm merely offering advice based on my experience with the board. They are traditional men who value traditional arrangements. Then they should value hard work, honesty, and proven success, Zachary replied firmly. All of which Silver Creek has demonstrated. The rest of the meeting proceeded more smoothly, with Mr. Wilson reviewing the remaining documents and asking detailed questions about the ranch's operations. By the time they adjourned for dinner, Nora sensed that the banker was genuinely impressed, despite his initial skepticism. Over a meal of roast beef and fresh vegetables from Mrs. Hoffman's garden, the conversation turned to more general topics: the growth of Montana territory, the possibility of statehood, the latest news from back east. Mr. Wilson proved to be more genial in a social setting, even complimenting Mrs. Hoffman on her excellent cooking. As the evening drew to a close, the banker rose to take his leave. "I'll be returning to Helena tomorrow," he said, shaking Zachary's hand. "You should have the board's decision within a week. And Mr. Fenton, despite my earlier comments, I do believe Silver Creek is a sound investment. Miss Faulkner has presented your case admirably." Nora felt a surge of pride at the acknowledgement. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson." After the banker had departed for his room at the town hotel, Zachary and Nora stood on the porch, watching the buggy disappear down the drive. "You were brilliant today," Zachary said quietly. "Thank you." "I only presented the facts," Nora replied. "Silver Creek's success is your achievement, not mine. Nevertheless, you made that success clear in a way I never could have." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "What Wilson said about marriage, I hope that didn't make you uncomfortable." Nora shook her head. "It was just business advice, however misguided." "Still," Zachary said, "it was presumptuous. My personal life is my own affair." "Of course," Nora agreed, though she found herself wondering about Zachary's past. Had there been someone once? A woman he'd loved and lost, perhaps during the war? They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "It's peaceful here," Nora said finally. "I can see why you love it." "It heals the soul," Zachary replied softly. "At least, it has healed mine." In that moment, Nora felt something shift between them, a subtle change, like the first whisper of spring after a long winter. She wasn't ready to name it, this feeling that stirred in her chest when he looked at her with those blue eyes that saw beyond her scar to the woman beneath. But it was there, a tiny seed that had taken root when he'd said those words on the auction block. "I see only treasure." The following week passed in a blur of activity as Nora settled into her role at Silver Creek. She established a proper bookkeeping system, organized Zachary's neglected correspondence, and even began teaching Mrs. Hoffman's teenage nephew, who worked in the stables, to read during the evening hours. Zachary was often busy with ranch operations, riding out at dawn to check on cattle with his men, and returning at dusk, covered in dust and exhaustion. But he always made time to review the day's business with Nora, genuinely interested in her suggestions for improving efficiency and record keeping. One evening, as they sat in his study going over supply orders, Nora noticed him watching her with an unusual intensity. "Is something wrong?" she asked, self-consciously touching her scar. "Not at all," he said quickly. "I was just thinking how fortunate Silver Creek is to have found you. The place runs more smoothly than ever before." "That's kind of you to say," Nora replied, pleased by the compliment. "It's the truth," Zachary insisted. "You've transformed chaos into order, befriended Mrs. Hoffman, started teaching Billy to read. You've become essential to Silver Creek in just a week." Nora didn't know how to respond. After months of being treated as a burden, first by the doctor, who had remarked that her survival was inconvenient given her parents' death, then by the bank that had seized her home, and finally, by the townspeople who had labeled her damaged goods. Zachary's words were like rain on parched earth. "I've always needed to be useful," she said finally. "My father taught me that. He said every person has gifts to offer the world and it's our duty to use them well." "Your father was a wise man," Zachary said. "What was he like?" "Kind," Nora said without hesitation. "Patient." "He was a bookbinder by trade, but he loved literature and history. He taught me to read when I was just 4 years old, and we would discuss everything from ancient Rome to Shakespeare." She smiled at the memory. "My mother said we were 2 peas in a pod, always with our noses in books while the real world went on around us. And your mother, practical, resilient. She kept us grounded when Father and I might have floated away on clouds of imagination." Nora's smile faded. "She was the strongest person I've ever known. When we came west after the war, leaving everything familiar behind, she never complained once. She just rolled up her sleeves and built a new life." "You're like her," Zachary observed. "Stronger than you know." Nora shook her head. "I fell apart after the accident. If you had seen me—" "I see you now," Zachary interrupted gently. "A woman who survived tragedy and kept going, who stood on that auction block with dignity when others tried to strip it away, who has transformed Silver Creek in a single week through sheer determination and intelligence. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." Nora felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them away hastily. "Thank you," she whispered. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the study door. Hank stood there, hat in hand. "Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Fenton, but a rider just came from town. Banks sent a letter." He held out an envelope. Zachary took it, his expression carefully neutral. "Thank you, Hank." The foreman nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind him. "This will be the loan decision," Zachary said, turning the envelope over in his hands. "You want privacy?" Nora asked, rising from her chair. "No," he said quickly. "Please stay. You're as invested in this as I am." He broke the seal and unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning the contents. Nora watched his face, trying to discern the news from his expression. Slowly, a smile spread across his features. "They approved it," he said, looking up at her with joy lighting his eyes. "Full amount, favorable terms. Silver Creek can expand as planned." "That's wonderful," Nora exclaimed, genuine happiness for him bubbling up inside her. Without warning, Zachary stepped forward and swept her into an embrace, lifting her off her feet in his excitement. "We did it," he laughed. For a moment, Nora was too startled to respond. Then, caught up in his joy, she found herself laughing too, her hands resting on his broad shoulders for balance. As he set her down, their eyes met, and the laughter faded. His hands remained at her waist and hers on his shoulders, neither quite ready to break the connection. "Nora," he said softly, using her first name for the first time. The study door swung open, and they stepped apart quickly as Mrs. Hoffman bustled in with a tray of coffee. "I thought you might need some refreshment while you work," the housekeeper said, then paused, noticing the charged atmosphere. "Have I interrupted something?" "Just good news, Mrs. Hoffman," Zachary said smoothly, though a flush had crept into his cheeks. "The bank has approved our loan for expansion." "Wonderful," the housekeeper exclaimed. "That calls for a celebration. I'll bake a special cake for dinner tomorrow." After she left, Nora and Zachary stood awkwardly, the moment between them broken but not forgotten. "I should retire for the evening," Nora said finally. "It's getting late." "Of course," Zachary agreed. "Thank you again for all your help with the loan application. I couldn't have done it without you." "You're welcome," Nora replied, gathering her papers. "Good night, Mr. Fenton." "Zachary," he corrected gently. "I think we've moved beyond formalities, don't you?" Nora hesitated, then nodded. "Good night, Zachary." "Good night, Nora." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Nora's mind whirled with confused emotions. The way he had looked at her held her. It had awakened feelings she had thought died along with her hopes for the future. But was she ready to trust again? To open herself to the possibility of loss? And even if she was, could a man like Zachary truly be interested in a scarred schoolteacher with nothing to her name? The questions followed her into sleep, where they transformed into dreams of blue eyes and strong arms that held her safely against the storms of life. The next morning, Nora awoke to the sound of rain pattering against her window, a rare occurrence in the summer months. The gray skies matched her uncertain mood as she dressed and made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hoffman was kneading dough for the promised celebration cake. "Good morning, Miss Faulkner. Isn't this rain a blessing? The pastures have been so dry." "It is indeed," Nora agreed, accepting a cup of coffee. "Where is everyone this morning?" Mrs. Hoffman's knowing smile suggested she understood exactly who Nora was asking about. "Mr. Fenton rode out at dawn despite the weather, something about checking the creek levels. He said to tell you he'd be back by lunchtime and would like to discuss plans for the expansion then." "I see," Nora said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Then I'll use the morning to catch up on correspondence." She spent the next few hours in the study, writing letters to suppliers and responding to business inquiries. The work was satisfying, but her thoughts kept drifting to the previous evening, the way Zachary's arms had felt around her, the warmth in his eyes when he'd said her name. Around midday, the rain stopped, and sunlight began to break through the clouds. Nora had just sealed the last envelope when she heard hoofbeats in the yard. She moved to the window and saw Zachary dismounting, his clothes soaked from the rain but his face alight with energy. He looked up, as if sensing her presence, and their eyes met through the glass. He smiled, a warm, private smile that seemed meant for her alone, and Nora felt her heart flutter in response. A few minutes later, he appeared in the study doorway, having changed into dry clothes. "Good morning," he said. "Or afternoon, rather. I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long." "Not at all," Nora replied. "I've been busy with letters." "Always working," he said approvingly. "But I thought we might take a break today. In honor of the loan approval and the beautiful weather after the rain. Would you ride with me this afternoon? There's something I'd like to show you." Nora hesitated. "I told you I haven't ridden since." "I remember," Zachary said gently, "but I'll be with you. And I promise these horses are gentle and well-trained. You'll be perfectly safe." Nora looked into his earnest face and found herself nodding despite her fear. "All right, but nothing too adventurous. Just a short ride," he promised. "We'll be back well before dinner." An hour later, Nora found herself mounted on a placid chestnut mare named Daisy, following Zachary along a well-worn trail that wound through meadows bright with wildflowers after the rain. Her initial terror had subsided to mere anxiety, and she was beginning to remember the pleasure of riding through beautiful countryside. "You're doing wonderfully," Zachary called over his shoulder. "Daisy likes you." "She's very patient with me," Nora replied, patting the mare's neck. "Where are we going? You'll see," he said with a mysterious smile. "It's not much further." The trail began to climb a gentle slope, and as they crested the hill, Nora gasped at the view that spread before them. The entire Silver Creek Valley lay below, emerald green after the rain, with the creek itself winding like a silver thread through the center. In the distance, snow-capped mountains rose against the blue sky, and closer at hand, a small lake shimmered in the afternoon sunlight. "It's breathtaking," Nora said softly. "This is the land I want to add to Silver Creek," Zachary explained, gesturing toward the unspoiled vista. "All the way to that ridge line in the distance. Some of the best grazing land in the territory, and the lake never runs dry, even in the hottest summer. I can see why you want it, Nora said. It's perfect. They dismounted, and Zachary spread a blanket on a grassy spot overlooking the valley. From his saddlebag, he produced a small picnic bread, cheese, cold chicken, and a bottle of cider. Mrs. Hoffman's contribution, he explained as they sat. She thought we should celebrate properly. As they ate, Zachary shared his vision for the expanded ranch where new fences would run, where cattle would graze, where he might build a smaller house for the future ranch manager. "You've thought of everything," Nora observed, impressed by his attention to detail. "I've had years to plan," Zachary admitted. "This land has been my dream since I first saw it 5 years ago. The owner wasn't ready to sell then, but he is now." He looked out over the valley, his expression reflective. "When I came west after the war, I was looking for somewhere to disappear. I never expected to find a place that would make me want to build something lasting." "And now?" Nora asked. He turned to her, his blue eyes serious. "Now I find myself thinking about the future in ways I haven't for a very long time. About what I'm building and who I might be building it for." The meaning behind his words hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. "Zachary," Nora began, not sure what she wanted to say but feeling the need to say something. He reached out, his fingers lightly touching her hand where it rested on the blanket. "You don't need to say anything. I know it's too soon. I just wanted you to see this place, to understand what it means to me." Nora looked down at his hand covering her strong, tanned from work in the sun, yet gentle in its touch. "Thank you for showing me," she said softly. "It's a beautiful dream." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "We should head back," Zachary said finally. "Mrs. Hoffman will be waiting with her celebration cake." As they rode home in the gathering dusk, Nora found herself stealing glances at the man beside her, at the strong line of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the easy way he sat his horse. In the short time she had known him, Zachary Fenton had upended every expectation, every fear, every doubt. He had seen value in her when others saw damage, strength where others saw weakness. And perhaps, she thought with a flutter of hope, he might be beginning to see something else as well, not just an employee or a friend, but a woman with a heart that was scarred but still capable of love. The days that followed settled into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings found Nora in the study, managing the ranch's business affairs, while afternoons often included rides with Zachary to various parts of the property. He seemed determined to share Silver Creek with her, to help her see it through his eyes, not just as a business, but as a home. 2 weeks after the loan approval, papers arrived finalizing the purchase of the additional land. That evening, the entire ranch gathered for a celebration. Ranch hands, their families, even some neighbors from nearby properties. Mrs. Hoffman outdid herself with a feast that had the long trestle tables in the yard groaning under the weight of food. After dinner, someone produced a fiddle, another a harmonica, and soon music filled the air. Couples began to dance in the cleared space before the barn, their movements illuminated by lanterns hanging from the trees. Nora sat with Mrs. Hoffman, watching the festivities with a smile. She had grown fond of the Silver Creek community, of Hank's dry humor, Thomas's quiet competence with horses, Billy's earnest efforts to learn reading, and Mrs. Hoffman's motherly concern for everyone under her care. "It's good to see the place so alive," Mrs. Hoffman remarked, following Nora's gaze across the yard where Zachary was talking animatedly with a group of ranchers. "There was a time when Mr. Fenton wouldn't even consider hosting a gathering like this." "Really?" Nora asked, curious about this glimpse into Zachary's past. The housekeeper nodded. When he first came here, he was different, quiet, kept to himself, threw himself into building the ranch like a man running from something. She patted Nora's hand. He's changed these past couple of years, started to open up to let people in. And these past few weeks since you arrived, well, I haven't seen him this happy in all the time I've known him. Before Nora could respond, the subject of their conversation appeared before them, slightly flushed from exertion and smiling broadly. "Mrs. Hoffman, would you mind if I borrowed Miss Faulkner for a dance?" Zachary asked, extending his hand to Nora. "Not at all," the housekeeper replied with a knowing smile. "You young people enjoy yourselves." Nora hesitated. "I'm not sure I remember how," she admitted. "It's been a long time." "Then I'll remind you," Zachary said, his hand still outstretched. "Just follow my lead." As Nora placed her hand in his and allowed him to guide her toward the dancing area, she felt a familiar flutter of nerves. Not fear this time, but anticipation. The musicians had just begun a waltz, slower and more intimate than the lively reels that had preceded it. Zachary drew her into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, and began to move in time to the music. "See your feet, remember," he said as they glided across the packed earth. "You're a good teacher," Nora replied, growing more confident with each step. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" "My mother insisted on proper lessons for my brother and me," Zachary said with a smile. "She had aspirations of us becoming gentlemen, despite our father's protestations that such skills were useless on a farm. And was she right? Apparently so, since I'm finally putting those lessons to use." His eyes held hers, warm with something more than friendship. "Though I never expected to dance again after the war." "Why not?" Nora asked softly. Zachary's expression grew distant. "After what I'd seen, what I'd done, it didn't seem right to participate in something so joyful when so many would never have the chance again. And now—" His gaze returned to her, present and intense. "Now I'm learning that life doesn't end with loss. That joy can follow grief if we're brave enough to accept it." They danced in silence after that, the music wrapping around them like a spell, isolating them from the crowd that watched with approving smiles. Nora was aware only of Zachary's hand at her waist, the solid strength of his shoulder beneath her palm, the way his eyes never left her face. When the music ended, they remained for a moment in their close embrace, neither quite ready to break the connection. "Would you walk with me?" Zachary asked quietly. "Away from the crowd for a bit." Nora nodded, and they slipped away from the celebration toward the garden where Mrs. Hoffman grew herbs and flowers. The night was warm, fragrant with the scent of roses and the distant smell of pine from the hills. Above them, stars spangled the vast Montana sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. They walked in companionable silence for a while, their arms occasionally brushing. When they reached a stone bench beside a small pond, Zachary gestured for her to sit. "I've been thinking," he said, settling beside her, "about the future, about Silver Creek." "It's going to be magnificent," Nora said sincerely. "Everything you've planned." "That's just it," Zachary interrupted gently. "I've been planning for the ranch, for the land, for the business, but I've realized there's something missing from those plans." "What?" Nora asked, though a part of her already knew the answer. "Someone to share it with," he said simply. "Someone who sees Silver Creek the way I do, not just as a business, but as a home, a legacy." He took her hand, his touch warm in the cool night air. "I know we've known each other only a short time, but I feel as if I've been waiting for you all my life, Nora. You've brought order to my chaos, laughter to my solitude, and hope where I thought none remained." Nora's heart pounded in her chest, joy and fear warring within her. "Zachary, "You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden, but I wanted you to know that when I look at you, I see my future, and it's brighter than I ever dared hope." Tears pricked at Nora's eyes. "When you found me at that auction, I had nothing left to give. No home, no family, no hope. Just debts and scars and broken dreams." "That's not true," Zachary said, reaching up to gently trace the line of her scar with his fingertip. "You had courage, dignity, intelligence, strength. All the things that made me say those words on the auction block that I saw treasure where others saw damage." "I'm beginning to believe you," Nora whispered, "because when I look at myself through your eyes, I see someone I could love again, someone worthy of being loved." "You are," Zachary said fervently. "More than worthy, extraordinary." In the distance, the music and laughter of the celebration continued, but in the quiet garden, time seemed suspended as Zachary leaned forward, his intention clear in his eyes. Nora met him halfway, her heart racing as their lips met in a kiss that was gentle yet filled with promise. When they drew apart, Zachary's smile was luminous in the starlight. "Is that a yes to what?" Nora asked, a little breathless. "You haven't actually asked me anything." Zachary laughed, the sound rich with joy. "Fair point." He slid from the bench to one knee before her, still holding her hands in his. "Nora Faulkner, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here at Silver Creek, turning this house into a home, this land into a legacy we can share?" Nora looked into his earnest face at the love and hope shining in his eyes and felt the last of her doubts fall away. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." Zachary's whoop of delight echoed across the garden as he swept her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. As they walked back to the celebration, hand in hand, Nora felt a sense of rightness, of coming home after a long journey. 3 months ago, she had lost everything she thought mattered. Tonight, she had gained something she hadn't known. She was missing a love that saw beyond scars to the treasure beneath. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the Silver Creek community, met with universal approval. Mrs. Hoffman was especially delighted, confessing that she had been hoping for just such an outcome since the day Zachary had brought Nora home. "I've never seen two people more perfectly matched," she declared as she helped Nora plan the wedding. "Both of you stubborn as mules, smart as whips, and kind right down to your bones." They decided on a simple ceremony in early September, when the wildflowers would still be blooming but the worst of the summer heat would have passed. Nora, who had expected to feel rushed or uncertain, found instead that each day deepened her certainty that she was making the right choice. Zachary proved to be an attentive fiancé, finding small ways to show his affection: wildflowers on her desk in the morning, a book of poetry he'd ordered from Helena, evening rides to watch the sunset from their hilltop overlooking the valley. But he was also respectful of her independence, never crowding her or making decisions without her input. One evening, about 2 weeks before the wedding, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I realized something today," Zachary said, his arm around her shoulders. "We've been so busy planning for the wedding and the expansion that we haven't discussed where we'll live afterward." Nora looked at him in surprise. "Here at Silver Creek, of course." "Yes, but where exactly?" He gestured toward the main house behind them. "This house was built for a bachelor. It's comfortable enough, but perhaps you'd prefer something newer, something we designed together." Nora considered the question. "I love this house," she said finally. "It's solid and welcoming with history in its walls, just like you." She smiled up at him. "But I wouldn't mind making some changes, perhaps expanding the library, adding a proper music room with a piano." "And a nursery," Zachary added softly. Eventually. The thought of children, their children, sent a warm glow through Nora's chest. Yes, she agreed. A nursery. Perhaps more than one in time. Zachary's arm tightened around her. I love you, he said simply. More than I ever thought possible. And I love you, Nora replied, the words still new enough to give her a little thrill each time she spoke them. For seeing the woman beneath the scar, for giving me a second chance at happiness. You've given me the same gift, Zachary said. Before you, I was just existing. Now I'm living again. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Zachary stood, hand moving instinctively to the gun he no longer wore at his hip. We're not expecting anyone, are we? Before Nora could answer, a rider appeared in the yard, a young man on a lathered horse, his face grim in the fading light. Mr. Fenton, he called, reining to a stop. Thank God you're home. There's trouble in Concordia. What kind of trouble, Jimmy? Zachary asked, stepping forward. Fire, sir. Half the town's ablaze. The sheriff's calling for every able-bodied man to help. Zachary turned to Nora, his expression torn. I have to go. Of course you do, she said immediately. I'll have Mrs. Hoffman pack food and bandages for the injured. Within 30 minutes, Zachary and most of the ranch hands had ridden for Concordia, leaving Nora, Mrs. Hoffman, and a few men to watch over Silver Creek. As the wagon loaded with supplies pulled away, Zachary reined his horse alongside the porch where Nora stood. Be careful, she said, reaching up to touch his face. I will, he promised. We'll be back as soon as we can. She watched until the dust from their departure had settled, then turned to Mrs. Hoffman. We should prepare the house. They may bring injured people back with them. The older woman nodded. I'll start making up beds in the guest rooms. The next few hours were a blur of activity as they transformed the dining room into a makeshift infirmary, prepared food for the returning men, and waited anxiously for news. It was well after midnight when they heard the wagons approaching. Nora ran to the door, her heart in her throat. The yard was suddenly filled with activity men lifting injured people from wagons, others unsaddling exhausted horses, voices calling for water and bandages. And there was Zachary, his face blackened with soot, his clothes singed but alive and whole. He caught sight of her in the doorway and made his way through the chaos, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Thank God you're safe, Nora whispered against his chest. The fire's under control, he reported, his voice hoarse from smoke. But many lost their homes. We've brought the most vulnerable here, the elderly, families with young children. The others are being sheltered in the church and schoolhouse. Nora pulled back, surveying the yard filled with dazed, soot-covered people. We'll make room for everyone, she promised. No one will be turned away. Zachary's tired eyes filled with pride. I knew you'd say that. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity, as Silver Creek became a refuge for those displaced by the fire. The bunkhouse was given over to families, with the ranch hands moving into the barn. The main house accommodated the elderly and injured. Meals were served outdoors under the trees, with everyone pitching in to help. Nora found herself in charge of organizing it all, assigning sleeping spaces, coordinating meals, ensuring that medical needs were met. She worked from dawn until well after dusk, stopping only when Zachary insisted she rest. On the third day, as she was distributing blankets to a family with 3 small children, she felt a tug at her skirt. Looking down, she found a little girl of about 5 staring up at her with solemn eyes. Does your face hurt? The child asked, pointing at Nora's scar. Before Nora could respond, the mother intervened. Lucy, that's not polite. I'm so sorry, Miss Faulkner. It's all right, Nora said, kneeling to the child's level. No, it doesn't hurt anymore, Lucy. It did when it first happened, but now it's just a mark that reminds me of a difficult time in my life." The little girl nodded sagely. "Like my arm," she said, holding up a small arm marked with a burn. "Daddy pulled me from the fire, but the bad flames got me first." "Lucy," the mother began, tears filling her eyes. "Your arm is very brave," Nora told the child. "And so are you. Scars just show that we're stronger than whatever tried to hurt us." Lucy considered this, then reached out to touch Nora's scar with gentle fingers. "You're brave too," she decided. That evening, as Nora recounted the conversation to Zachary, she found unexpected tears filling her eyes. "Do you know, that's the first time I've spoken about my scar without shame. The first time I've seen it as a sign of strength rather than damage." Zachary gathered her close. "That's how I've always seen it," he said softly. "As proof of your resilience, your courage." Nora rested her head on his shoulder, suddenly overwhelmed by gratitude for this man who had changed her life with a simple act of kindness on an auction block. "I love you," she whispered, "for everything you are and everything you've helped me become." "And I love you," he replied, "for showing me that the most valuable treasures are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the wisdom to recognize their worth." By the end of the week, the people of Concordia had begun to rebuild their town. Some chose to stay, finding work at Silver Creek or neighboring ranches, but most returned to the community they loved, determined to restore what had been lost. The day before they departed, the town's mayor, a portly man who had lost 20 pounds during the crisis, approached Nora and Zachary as they supervised the loading of supplies for those returning to Concordia. "Mr. Fenton, Miss Faulkner," he said, hat in hand. "On behalf of the people of Concordia, I want to express our deepest gratitude for your generosity during this difficult time." "It was nothing," Zachary began, but the mayor held up his hand. "It was everything," he corrected. "Shelter, food, medical care, and most importantly, dignity when we were at our lowest." He turned specifically to Nora. "And I owe you a personal apology, Miss Faulkner. The way you were treated in our town, it was inexcusable. I hope you can forgive us." Nora was taken aback by the unexpected apology. "That's very kind of you to say, Mayor Wilson." "It's the truth," the mayor insisted. "Sometimes it takes a disaster to make us see the best in people. You've shown us what true character looks like, both of you. Concordia won't forget that." He extended his hand to Zachary, then to Nora. "You'll always be welcome in our town." As the last wagon rolled away that evening, Nora and Zachary stood on the porch, watching until it disappeared from sight. "Life has a strange way of coming full circle," Nora observed. "3 months ago, I stood in that town square while people called me damaged goods. Today, the mayor himself apologized. Justice can be slow," Zachary agreed, "but it finds a way in the end." With the crisis past, preparations for the wedding resumed with renewed energy. The event, originally planned as a small, intimate affair, had grown as the people of Concordia and surrounding ranches expressed their desire to celebrate with the couple who had shown such generosity in their time of need. The day before the wedding, Nora stood in her room, looking out at the Silver Creek Valley that would soon be her permanent home. The land had never looked more beautiful, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Hoffman with yet another question about the wedding arrangements. Instead, it was Zachary who entered, a mysterious smile playing about his lips and a large package in his arms. "You're not supposed to see me," Nora protested, though she couldn't help smiling at the sight of him. "It's bad luck before the wedding." "That's just an old wives' tale," Zachary dismissed with a grin, "and I couldn't wait to give you this." He placed the package on the bed. Open it." Intrigued, Nora untied the string and unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a beautiful dress of ivory silk, embroidered with tiny pearls and silver thread. "Zachary," she breathed, lifting the gown from its wrappings. "It's exquisite." "I had it made in Helena," he explained. "Mrs. Hoffman provided the measurements. Do you like it?" "Like it. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." She held it against herself, marveling at the perfect fit, the way the silk caught the light. "But when did you arrange this? With everything that's happened?" "I ordered it the day after you agreed to marry me," Zachary admitted. "I wanted you to have something special, something that would make you feel as beautiful as you are to me." Nora felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For this, for everything. For making me feel like the treasure you said I was that first day." "You are a treasure," Zachary insisted, taking her hands in his. "The most valuable one I've ever found, and tomorrow I get to call you my wife." The next morning dawned clear and perfect, as if nature herself approved of the union about to take place. The ceremony was held outdoors, in the meadow near the house, with the mountains as a backdrop and the sky a canopy of blue above. Nora walked toward Zachary on Hank's arm, the foreman having proudly agreed to give her away, wearing the ivory silk dress that shimmered in the sunlight. Her hair was crowned with wildflowers, and in her hands she carried a bouquet of the same blooms that dotted the meadow around them. Zachary waited beneath an arch of twisted willow branches, looking handsome and a little nervous in a new black suit. His face as he watched her approach was a study in awe and love, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. The minister from Concordia performed the ceremony, his words about love and commitment, partnership and faith, floating on the gentle breeze that stirred the meadow grasses. When it came time for their vows, Zachary took Nora's hands in his and spoke from the heart. "Nora Faulkner, from the moment I saw you, I recognized something in you that called to my soul courage in the face of adversity, dignity in difficult circumstances, a spirit unbroken by life's hardships. You have brought light back into my world, order to my chaos, and love where I thought none would grow again. I pledge to you my heart, my name, my future, everything that I am and everything that I have. I will cherish you, respect you, and love you for all the days of my life, and I will thank God every day for bringing you to Silver Creek." Tears slipped down Nora's cheeks as she responded. "Zachary Fenton, you saw value in me when I had forgotten my own worth. You offered me choice when others would have commanded, respect when others showed scorn, and love when I thought myself unlovable. You are the bravest, kindest, most honorable man I have ever known, and I pledge to you my heart, my faith, and my future. I will stand beside you through whatever life brings, sharing your joys and your sorrows, your triumphs and your struggles. I will love you until my last breath, and I will thank God every day for the moment you said those words that changed my life. I see only treasure." There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering as they exchanged rings, simple gold bands that symbolized their endless commitment to each other. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary pulled Nora into a kiss that promised a lifetime of love, drawing cheers and applause from everyone present. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music and dancing, feast and fellowship. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Nora and Zachary slipped away from the festivities to the hilltop where he had first shown her his vision for Silver Creek's future. "Happy, Mrs. Fenton?" Zachary asked, drawing her close as they looked out over the land that was now truly their home. "More than I ever thought possible," Nora replied, leaning into his embrace. 6 months ago, I had lost everything, my parents, my home, my hope for the future. I never imagined I could find such happiness again. Life has a way of surprising us, Zachary said, pressing a kiss to her temple, of giving us second chances when we least expect them. And sometimes, Nora added, turning in his arms to face him, it gives us something even better than what we lost. As their lips met in a kiss that sealed their new beginning, Nora knew that the journey that had begun on an auction block in Concordia had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of a man who had looked beyond her scars to the treasure within, and in doing so, had given her the greatest treasure of all, a love that would last a lifetime. 5 years later, Silver Creek Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous properties in Montana Territory. The expansion that had begun with Zachary's loan had exceeded even his optimistic projections, with the cattle herd now numbering over 5,000 head, and the horse breeding program producing stock sought after throughout the West. The main house had been expanded as well, with the addition of the library and music room Nora had envisioned, plus 3 nurseries that were now occupied by the Fenton children, 4-year-old twins James and William, and 2-year-old Elizabeth, named for Zachary's mother. On a warm summer evening, much like the one when they had first danced together, Nora sat on the porch swing, watching as Zachary played with the boys in the yard. Elizabeth was curled in her lap, her dark curls so like her father's tickling Nora's chin as the child slept. Mrs. Hoffman emerged from the house with a tray of lemonade, smiling fondly at the scene before her. "Those boys are the spitting image of their father," she observed, setting the tray on a small table. "But little Elizabeth has your spirit." "Heaven help us all," Nora laughed softly, stroking her daughter's hair. "One stubborn woman in this house is quite enough." "2," Mrs. Hoffman corrected with a wink. "And soon to be 3, I'd wager." Zachary looked up from his game, catching Nora's eye across the yard. Even after 5 years of marriage, the love in his gaze still made her heart skip a beat. He said something to the boys, who immediately ran toward the porch, their small feet pounding on the hard-packed earth. "Mama," James called, reaching her first. "Papa says it's story time. Does he now?" Nora smiled, shifting Elizabeth to make room for the boys on the swing beside her. "And what story would you like to hear?" "The one about the auction," William piped up, his blue eyes so like his father's wide with excitement. "Where Papa found you." Zachary joined them on the porch, taking a seat on Nora's other side and slipping an arm around her shoulders. "That's my favorite story, too," he said, dropping a kiss on Elizabeth's curly head. "Once upon a time," Nora began, as she had many times before, "there was a young woman who had lost everything she held dear. She stood alone in a town square while people whispered cruel words about her." "Damaged goods," James recited solemnly, having heard the story often enough to know the key phrases. "That's right," Nora continued. "But then a tall, handsome rancher rode into town on his magnificent horse." "Papa!" both boys exclaimed in unison. "And when he saw the young woman," Zachary picked up the tale, his voice warm with memory, "he knew immediately that she was special, that beneath her sadness and her scars was a treasure beyond price. So he took her home to his ranch," Nora said, leaning into her husband's embrace, "where she learned that scars don't define a person, that loss isn't the end of the story, and that sometimes the most precious treasures are found in the most unexpected places." "And they lived happily ever after," William finished triumphantly. "Yes," Zachary agreed, his eyes meeting Nora's over their children's heads. "They certainly did." As the sun set over Silver Creek Ranch, painting the sky in the same glorious colors that had blessed their wedding day, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the depths of despair on that auction block to the heights of joy in the arms of a man who had seen her true value. Her life had been transformed by those simple words. "They call you damaged goods. I see only treasure." And in the end, that was the real miracle of Silver Creek, not the prosperity it had achieved, or the beauty it contained, but the healing it had brought to two wounded souls who had found in each other the courage to love again, to build a future together, and to create a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come.